Hi, Chickenbone John here. Welcome to part 3 in building your cigar box guitar. Today we're going to learn how to shape the headstock. This is like the Fender style thing. There are no complicated joints, it's all cut out of the solid. And all we're going to be using are some simple hand tools. The sort of thing you've probably got in your garage, your shed, or in that sort of, cupboard under the stairs. Tenon saw. Really cheap, 5 or 6 quid, nothing fancy. Chisel, this is a nice old one that I got for nothing, but you can get one from a local DIY store or whatever for a fiver. You can probably buy a set of these for about 12 quid from Aldi. We'll also use a mallet. You don't have to have one of these, but it's handy. Again, 5 or 6 quid. And the other thing we're going to be using, a half round file. Again, the sort of thing you've probably got lying around in your toolbox, but not expensive to buy. We're not going to be using any fancy power tools, no specialist hand tools, the sort of thing that everybody has or you can pick up dead cheap. Let's get into it. Okay, so after getting our neck stock nicely smoothed out, we want to mark the head and cut the head. Now I've marked this here already and I'm going about 125 millimeters down from the top of the headstock. This is to get my 3 tuners in, and I'm leaving about 15 millimeters thickness on the headstock, and I'm just going to gauge that in. I've marked it already, but I'll show you how to. I'm just going to gauge that in with a pencil and draw it up. Don't use a biro or a felt tip when you're marking it out. You'll never get the thing clean again. Gauge it right the way round. We mark it round. We mark it onto the edge of here, and we do the same thing. I'm just going to gauge it with my hand and then come through there. So that's where I want to be approximately. Just make sure that that's done. There's a few ways we can cut this out. We will often cut these out on our bandsaw, but not everybody's got a bandsaw or wants a bandsaw. There's another couple of ways we could put a saw cut through there, along there. But if you're using a tenon saw, it's not going to get any further than that, so that's problematical. So you would neither use like a regular rip saw, hand saw, or if you want to get fancy, one of these Japanese saws. Now this has got no back and it cuts on the pull stroke. They're very sharp, but as you can see it's got no back, so we could saw right the way in on here. They are quite expensive, typically 20 or 30 pounds, and that's regarded as a cheap one. It's a bit of a specialist saw. The thing that you're most likely to have in your house or your workshop is one of these. Now what we can do is we can take a series of cuts across here down to that line, then knock it out with a chisel and then sand and file it flat. What I've got here, this little bit of wood, is a bench hook, and as you can see it's just a scrap of plywood or MDF with 2 bits of wood glued and screwed, and it's called a bench hook because it hooks onto the end of the bench. Now that can be used as a substitute for a vise. If I lay that in there, you can actually see there's a bit of a gap under that, but I can put a little packer underneath, and the whole idea of this is if you lean against that, I've got my body weight on this hand, it actually effectively clamps this into place. Okay, so what I can do, start with my saw, just come back. This is a new one, so it's actually a little bit grabby. This is just a cheap tenon saw. This one's from Wicks, I believe. When you're using the tenon saw, if you see, it's got a little indent of these plastic handles for your finger, pointing where the saw's going. So it's just a nice easy action. Don't go fast, don't fight it. I'm using the whole of the blade. Lovely little expression I heard when we were doing a workshop in Germany, and it sounded just like my dad with his old Yorkshire expressions. This guy sort of was telling his son, he said, "You've bought all of the saw, use it all." And I think that's a great expression. So just keep an eye on how you're coming down to your line both sides. This is why it's useful to mark both sides, because it's very easy to tip the saw forward or back. So we want to be trying to saw parallel to your bench top. So don't rush it. I need to be a little bit nose down on the other side, I think. Okay, so we're going to take it out in about 12mm pieces. I'm not going to mark this out, just get the thing started. You see, if you go too far with one cut, you'll end up with a groove that you're going to have to laboriously sand out. But what I'm trying to show with this, you do not need fancy hand tools, fancy power tools or expensive hand tools. This is, I don't know how much of these, 5 or 6 quid for it. You see what we're doing, we're just working our way along, moving this back so I've got full support and full control. You know, if you want, you can put your saw against that edge, and that also helps steady it, like that. I'm putting the toe, the toe of what I call the toe of the saw down here, and then leveling it, but always checking you've not gone too far, you've not sawn down too far on one side. The more accurate you are, the better it will all come out. So we just move it on again. It takes a little time, but you know, I think most people are doing this for fun or as a hobby. So don't worry about it. Okay, so we've sawn that down. If you want to put more cuts through that, it will come out easier. And we can actually do the same thing here. We go a bit closer. We can saw down to our line where we've got this scoop coming out. Okay. There we go, we've got this coming round. Let's put some more cuts in. It's only going to take a couple of minutes. So you see what we're doing with this. We're sort of slotting it so that we're going to knock this out with a chisel. With a lot of this stuff, there's no right and wrong way of doing it. You know, that cigar box guitar thing, there's no rules, but some things are easier than others. So I've got the whole thing slotted, ready to knock out. Now, here's a couple of chisels. Okay. To take this out, there's a couple of ways we can tackle this. We can put the work on end and chisel down towards the bench, and I'm doing it on here so I'm not damaging my table if I'm going to do it that way, or I can turn it this way and take it out like that against the bench hook. Now I think I'll show you both methods. Now we can do this by hand, and I'm not going to go all the way down to the line, I'm going to go about halfway down so I can gauge the feel of the wood. See, I'm just tapping that with my hand. I'm not even tapping it there. I'm just pushing. We can get a mallet. Don't use a hammer with a chisel. So I'm just doing it by hand. And you see, I'm just tapping with the heel of my hand. That's all I'm doing. If you want to use a mallet, you might feel you've got a little bit more control. And you can just take it out one strip at a time. Here's our mallet. Standard bit of woodworking kit. And as I say, you can just work this across. Very, very light taps. That's all I'm using. Very light taps. You can hold the thing nearer the head, so you get a little bit more control. You're not swinging it as much. Or we can turn it on its side. Oh, here's an important thing with the chisel. If you see, I'm using it with, this is what's called the bevel, where it's sharpened here. You see it going down to an edge. That's the bevel, and I'm using it bevel side up. So the flat part of the chisel, what I would call the underneath, the flat part, the back, is against the work. Just lightly clamp it. So what you don't want to be doing when you're using tools is having to hold the thing with one hand and try and do things, single-handed. So that's clamped down lightly here. So what I can do, I'll take the smaller of the chisel. I'm just going to go one notch at a time, and I'm just going to go down like that. I can just press, or even the classic way is to literally put your shoulder into it. You hardly need it. This is a piece of cherry wood. Oops. Okay, and we're just going to tap. You want to keep away from the line because it might want to split down towards your line. So if anything, you see what I'm doing? I'm just angling that back, so it's probably going to form a peak in the middle of the wood that will need chiseling out. Now here's a little bit tricky, so I'm just going to work my way down a bit there, not too far. See if I can cut at an angle. It's going to want to cut across the grain. What we're going to do now is have a look at it from the other side. So can you see it's left all of that in? So we can very simply turn it around. So can you see I'm just going to angle that up so it's not going to break down towards the headstock. We want to keep that line nice and clean. So you may feel this is a lot of faffing about, but you know, are you in so much of a hurry that you feel you've got to use power tools? Power tools won't do this any better for you. It'll do it quicker. But if you do it like this, can you see now? I'm just trying to level off. Get this a bit more even. And I'm exerting downward pressure with my hand. I'm holding the mallet fairly near the top, so I'm not taking a big swing. That gives you plenty of swing if you hold, but if you hold it nearer the head, you've got a bit more fine control. And can you see it's beginning to come down? Be very careful about going right the way across. You see, I'm not going right the way across because it could split the wood down to that edge. So what I'll probably do is just keep tapping away. Just keep tapping away, bit at a time, bit at a time. You know you're going to get there. The one thing I always say about using hand tools, although I use power tools a lot, to use power tools safely and effectively, I think you need to have a feel for the wood. Now with this, can you see the way that's coming across, that is breaking out those chips nice and evenly? but you've got to feel for exactly what's happening, the relationship between the blade and the wood and the amount of effort you're putting in. With a power tool, the machine's putting the effort in for you, so you can't really feel it. And what you usually do with, say, a bandsaw or a table saw, you feed the wood in by hand, and you need to develop a feel for how the machine is reacting, and you can feel that back through the wood. But if you've never worked with hand tools, it's quite likely that you never get that feel. Okay, I'm going to flip this over. You may be able to see now it's getting closer. Don't be tempted to rush this and knock big lumps out of it. I'm going to go to the bigger chisel now so I can get a bit more out in one go. I'm going across a couple of these blocks now, but can you see I'm going half and half on the bit I've cut and the next little block. Now, as we've done this, you know, they're on about 5 or 6 mil, 1/4 of an inch gaps, so they're nicely manageable. Okay, so now we can start actually paring it down by hand. We want to get rid of most of those saw cuts, so there's quite a long way to go, and obviously to make this nice and even, we're going to end up going to the deepest of those saw cuts. This is a little bit trickier here where we've got this concave, so we're not going to get this perfect. We'll rough that out and then we can finish that up with a half round file or rasp. But here, see, I'm keeping the pressure on the wood, so I'm going to cross now. I'm going with the grain, so I'm beginning to feel all the time, feel what the wood's doing. See, this wider chisel is now helping me get a flat surface on this. And you see, I'm working across diagonally. It's a little bit smoother going than trying to knock out against the grain. We're going against the grain here, so it's a little bit easier. But I've still got plenty of saw marks. But I'm keeping, you see what I'm doing? I'm keeping the pressure on the blade. Back of this chisel is against the wood, and I'm going across nice and steady. You know, we're getting there. We're getting there. See, we're nearly down to the line. This is still a bit raggedy. Let's have a look at the other side. Not too bad. I think we're going to turn that over and work from the other side so it doesn't get uneven. Okay, so I'm just going to go across here a wee bit so that feels lovely. This is lovely stuff to work with. Really nice stuff to work with, the cherry wood. Cherry wood, and you know, that's a fairly sharp chisel. It's not what I think people will call scary sharp, but it's pretty decent. And you can see we've a little bit of movement on my clamp there. We're beginning to be able, now what I'm doing here, I'm going down the length of the headstock. This is going to be more efficient than tackling this with a piece of sandpaper or a file, because effectively, you know, it's an awkward shape to get a plane onto it because of this curve. But all a plane is a chisel blade in a body. And in fact, some people make their own little planes using a chisel blade. using an old chisel. So that's exactly what it is. It's the same action, the same cut on the edge of your blade. And can you see, we're getting rid of these marks now. We're getting rid of them. I want rid of them all, but I mean, I might just leave it to filing or sanding the last of these marks out. But I'm just going patiently with it. You can actually check how flat you've got it by using the edge of the chisel, which should be fairly straight. Or you could be old school and use a ruler. I think I've got a little bit of a, what I call a little bit of a hog in it there. But you know, all this stuff we're doing here, not time-lapsed or anything. Yeah, we've got some fairly deep marks there, so I'm going to have to bring everything down to that level. Do be careful, don't try and hog off too much in one go. Take your time. Nobody's in a rush. It's a hobby. You're supposed to enjoy this. Okay, can you see now? We're getting rid of these marks. I'm going to take this out and see if we square and eyeballing it, I can tell it's high here. And if I put a square onto it, if it picks it up on the camera, that'll confirm we're quite high on that side. So if it starts getting thin on one side, you want to stay away from that. So we don't want to pare it down so it's really thin. So be careful there, I'm taking a little bit more than I like out of that. So I'm going to keep an eye on that. I want to be coming, you don't need much. It's coming back down now. It's probably going to leave me with a bit of an arch in that. But can you see, we're gradually getting rid of all these chisel marks, and they are going to go away. There. So we're not far out now. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to get a rasp, a half round rasp, and just get that knocked into shape, maybe put a file on that and see how we get along. Again, I'm not going to use anything fancy. I've got a half round file. That's a bastard file. That's the coarsest of the cuts. Well, it's fairly coarse cut for a file. And what I can do, and see, it's half round, flat on the back. I can get into here now, start getting rid of these saw cuts. Be careful you don't drop this too low. All I'm looking for is getting rid of me file, getting rid of my saw cuts. See, I'm rotating the file. I'm trying not, I keep doing that. I don't want to round that over. I want a nice crisp joint there. Okay, can you see where we are? We're left with a little bit of an upstand, so I can just tickle away with that. With my, just getting that out. See, keeping my hand out the way of the, you can see that's pretty sharp, that. It's pretty sharp. Just got a couple of little ridges. Just keeping the pressure on with one finger on the back of the file. We're beginning to get there. Now, apart from the lines you see in here, we can do what we did before. Put some pencil marks, witness marks, whatever you want to call them. I'm just going to check to see if I'm reasonably square. I think I'm still a little high on this side. I'll look at the end. Yes, I am. So this side is a bit high. So I'm just going to take it down, and you can see where you're taking it down. Just a simple pencil mark will actually act as a telltale. I don't know how much of that I've taken out now, so I'm going to stop and check and have a look. Just between my thumb and my fingers, there's a little lump there. I can feel there's a lump there. This isn't too bad. There's a bit of a dip there and a bit of a rise there. See, here's a bit problematical because I've got these saw cuts, so I'm going to have to go down to them. I'm just going to go there, so if I've got that high spot there and a low spot here, I might actually be able to knock that off. So I think I'm just going to be a little bit risky here. I want this to come down a bit. I can feel I've still got a little bit of a hump here. So if I take some of this material off here, I'm actually almost using it as a plane. I think a little bit sharpness has gone out the blade now, so I perhaps should sharpen it. You might be surprised at that. You know, you can't use these things for weeks and months and not expect them. Expect your tools to need a little bit of attention. This is old school stuff. So sharpening your tools is all part of the deal. But just see, I'm just feeling. I'll move that a wee back a wee bit. I might need to. They begin to go now. They begin to go. You see the lines are going now. But I'm going to check it again. We're down to the line. I'm a wee bit past it, but that's okay. And I'm a wee bit high there. I'm just going to check it visually. So I can see here, I've got a little bit of a high spot here. And the marks are coming out. The marks are coming out now. You know, if you're thinking 10 minutes ago, that was looking pretty grim. So the standard of finish, it's really a matter of how much patience you've got. That's all there is to it. So then we could start, you know, if you wanted to, we could finish that off with our block. So that needs a little bit more work. I can feel that. A couple of marks. I could probably spend another 10 minutes sanding. That wouldn't make exactly riveting viewing. But what we've got now is a headstock that's thinned, and let's see what it's showing. 14 millimeters. 14 millimeters. That's perfect for most type of machine heads. That's a fairly long-winded method of doing it. You can see there's still a couple of marks in here which I would sand out. I say the other method will be to do something like take a panel saw or a Ryobi, one of these, and cut down here, and we'd still file. It's difficult to get a controlled cut with a saw, especially if you haven't got a vise to put it into, because you'd really need to be maybe clamping it to the back. You know, I probably want to clamp it to the bench edge and saw like that. We may do that in another demonstration. As I said, there's more than one way to skin a cat, but that's our basic headstock finish. Okay, that may have taken a little bit of time to achieve this end result of doing this scooped out headstock, but I hope you think the effort was worth it. I just wanted to show that anybody can do this with basic hand tools, nothing specialist. It's not that hard. Take your time, take it steady, enjoy the trip. This is a hobby, it's supposed to be fun. So you don't have to spend lots and lots and lots of money on fancy electric power tools. Do it with your own two hands, you know, make a good job, learn something and have fun. See you in the next episode.